Hello, everybody. There is a vast divide between what is said and what is actually heard when you preach the gospel. We're sometimes accused of preaching heresy, license to sin, accused of mixed fruit, whatever. Was Jesus a heretic just because the darkness did not perceive him? As Peter said of Paul, many of his letters are hard to understand. Does that mean Paul was mixed up just because his listeners were? The gospel is not broken simply because it doesn't magically appear to bear the instant fruit that we were looking for. The gospel isn't broken, people are. And people project all sorts of ideas into what you're saying. No matter the clarity or professional articulation skills, none of that is going to fix it. Sometimes, when you preach grace, the religious performance veneer gets removed from someone's life. And the faithful pew warmer starts to act a little wild. He'll do some naughty stuff, and the grace message gets blamed for it. But in reality, it's naughty stuff that he always wanted to do. He's just not motivated by fear and guilt anymore to suppress it and act hypocritically nice. The problem is not the message, which says that they're free from sin. The problem is, as Paul's accusers thought he was saying, what they hear is that you're preaching freedom to sin. But what about someone who is strong in this message? If they who really appear to be strong start to go off the deep end, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever. I have dear friends who've preached this message passionately, yet because of life circumstances, difficulties, disappointments, or just some disconnect in processing the gospel into their own personal subjective reality of brokenness, they slip into justifying their own bad behavior under the guise of grace or following their heart. Does this faithfulness of theirs nullify God's faithfulness? By no means. Does it mean the gospel's broken even when its proponents forget the Christocentricity and begin preaching some go-your-own stubborn way, hard-headed humanism? By no means. If you step off a windowsill, you don't break the law of gravity, you only illustrate it. We've seen people running strong with us over the years who lose the plot entirely. Does this mean the message is at fault? No, it's their very divergence from the simplicity of Christ crucified that highlights the error. The gospel's not at fault, but their departure from it. Anyone can forget the main thing. No one is immune. Even Peter lost the plot at one point. Martin Luther said we need to hear the gospel every day because we forget it every day. Years ago, I said that the finished work message was about to go viral, but that my fear would be that some would see it just as a trend, just like any other charismatic flavor of the month. Oh, now we're into grace. And therefore, if it's just the next thing, it will quickly become discarded when the next thing comes along. And while many adhere to the message for a season because it seems cutting edge, and the whole MO of the prophetic camp is this underlying pressure to always be on the cutting edge with something new, it's really rooted in insecurity. When you like to be the one who's so far out in the land of spiritual exploration that no one gets you, and you're the only really edgy one, well, let me tell you, that means you're just full of yourself, because the Pharisee always likes to feel better about himself by putting others down. Such a hyper-spiritual person may picture himself as the absolute furthest thing from religion, but a good sign of religion is when you see it in everyone else, but not yourself. So by conveniently categorizing the gospel or grace as a mere movement, you can conveniently label it, stereotype it, discard it. Once you think you've been there, done that, and moved on. Meanwhile, you're the one who's evolved. Look, you can't evolve past the gospel. You can't evolve past grace. You're not really into something new. There's nothing new under the sun anyways. You just forgot the rock from which you're cut, and you're trying to invent your own identity out of insecurity. People who abandon the gospel generally go one of two ways, but both are connected. They slip into the yeast of Herod or the yeast of the Pharisees. That means worldliness or legalism. Both play off of one another. Let's look at those first who turn to legalism. They turn back to religion. They're going along just fine, and then they encounter some problem. Grace didn't work, so they want to re-engage the rule book as an insurance policy and put a damper on the gospel. some problem at home or whatever, and they quickly jump back to looking for demons, inner healing issues, or something they need to fix in their spirituality. They feel guilty for slacking off so long and actually thinking Jesus was in control. The seed of the gospel never really took root. That's usually the way that pastors go after they've given grace a whirl for a while in their church. They miss the garlic and onions and tithers of guilt-driven Egyptian slavery. So they want to put the train in reverse, conveniently forgetting how depressed they used to be. But look, not everybody turns back to religion when they think the gospel's broken. Quite the opposite. Some were so battered by the system and offended at the legalists that they spin the opposite direction. They throw caution to the wind and they embrace a sort of make-your-own-way lawlessness, worldliness. They wouldn't call it that. They may not be out smoking crystal meth, not a full-blown Roman Gnostic do-whatever-you-want free-for-all, but a dull, Christless melee start to creep over them. These are the guys who wouldn't overtly reject Jesus, they just lose interest. And if they have any spirituality at all, they've just kind of slumped into some mamsy-pamsy makeshift spirituality of, I don't know, Oprah and Deepak Chopra quotes. Their focus may occasionally turn to some social gospel charitable work kind of thing as a panacea, do nice things occasionally as a remedy for the guilt of what in the old days we called backsliding. As a minister in the charismatic church over the years, I can't count how many zealous people I've seen passing through the revolving door of the gospel message and then burn out like a comet. Look, boys and girls, we cannot be so fruit-focused that we miss the point, because sometimes you don't know where people's issues are coming from. The gospel's not broken, but people are. And that's not their true identity, but they're living in that false lie of Adam. So our job is to go out and continually preach this glorious message. It's okay to sound like a broken record. It's okay to be stuck on this revelation. I have resolved to know nothing. I have become an expert in the knowledge of nothing. I pursue higher level education in the knowledge of jack diddly squat, but Christ and Him crucified. Stick with the simplicity of the gospel. I'm telling you what, boys and girls, eventually you're gonna see fruit. And if you see somebody waver along the way, you help them out, you pick them up, but ultimately our trust is in Jesus, not in our fellow man. God bless you guys. Love you guys. See you next week.